Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. And on Fridays, I do a lot of times, had a little bit of a break lately, but I do what I call responding to the critics. Last week, I introduced to you a video by Dr. Gavin OrtLund, a very, very popular internet figure, a minister, uh, man of very kind demeanor in the video that I've watched. And his video is addressing full preterism and the question of whether or not full preterism is heresy. Now, last week I shared with you that right out of the box, I mean, within the first 10 or 15 minutes of his video, he accused full preterism of being just neo-Hymenaeanism. That is to say, 2,000 years ago, Hymenaeus and Philetus said the resurrection is already past. Paul said that was heresy. 2,000 years later, preterists are affirming that the resurrection happened in AD 70 and therefore is already past. Modern day preterists are saying the same thing that Hymenaeus said 2,000 years ago. Hymenaeus was a heretic, therefore modern day preterists are heretics. Now, honestly, that accusation really, I mean, it overlooks or ignores a vast body of textual evidence. I mean, it just does the Passover on all of those. And really, it doesn't do justice. It's almost a knee-jerk response to the full preterist view without looking into what preterists are actually saying. Now, I was pleased somewhat to know that Dr. Ortland had read J. Stuart Russell's book. But J. Stuart Russell does not address all of these issues. And so I think it's very, very important that I be able, and by the way, some others have undertaken as well to respond to Dr. Ortland. Zach Davis has produced a video, and one other person, I'm sorry, I've forgotten their name at the present time. So Zach Davis has produced at least one video responding to him. Someone else has, and I'm going to be discussing Dr. Ortland's videos as they come out. I will give a little bit of a fair warning on this video, because in the last part of his video, number one, he introduces the subject of the millennium. Now, I don't know, I don't hardly know of a more controversial subject than the millennium. Now, as a partial preterist, Dr. Ortland believes that the millennium is the Christian age, as he states in his video. So, my struggle here, I'll be honest with you, it's a real struggle. Pardon me. Allergies. My struggle is, okay, how much time do I spend on the millennium? And a little bit of insight here. I am currently finishing, perhaps I should say, trying to finish a major book on the millennium. It will be entitled The Mystery of the Millennium Unveiled. I am not aware of another book from any period that approaches this subject in the way that I do. I'll be sharing with you about a book on the millennium that I actually contributed to near the close of this video. But in the meantime, let me remind you, just as an introduction, okay, just as a few introductory remarks, Dr. Ortland said, okay, here's Hymenaeus and Philetus. They say the resurrection is past. That's heresy. I asked you to consider if Hymenaeus was saying the resurrection of every dead human being who has ever died, gone into the grave, gone into the sea, is raised at the end of the Christian age, which is Dr. Ortland's position, how could anybody, how could Hymenaeus, how could Philetus, how could anybody else say that day, that event had already come? Now, I don't know if Dr. Ortland has ever considered this or not. It's interesting to me that is in his video, he says he cites 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, but he ever so conveniently, and I'm not impugning his integrity by any stretch of the imagination, maybe it was for time, I don't know, but he ever so conveniently ignores 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, where Paul says, brethren, do not let anybody convince you that the day of the Lord has already come. Now watch this. The resurrection occurs at the end of the millennium. Right? Revelation chapter 20, 10 and following. The day of the Lord occurs at the end of the millennium. Hymenaeus and Philetus were teaching the day of the Lord and the resurrection had already come. So let me repose the question to you and to Dr. Ortland. And by the way, I have posted twice in the comment section of his video. I would dearly love to meet Dr. Ortland in a formal, cordial, friendly, collegial debate on this whole issue. And more specifically, I would be thrilled to debate Dr. Ortland on the millennium. Is it past? Is it present? Is it future? I posted that just this morning. Well, actually, this is Friday. I posted my challenge, my invitation on Tuesday. We'll see if he accepts. Others have chimed in and said it would be great for Dr. Ortland to debate me. Okay, so I reminded you and I informed you, I've written 2 books on this very subject. The Hymenaean heresy reversed the charges. And how is this possible? No one has definitively and substantively answered the material in these books. Some have said, well, you don't understand, Preston. Hymenaeus and Philetus were saying that a kind of resurrection, not the resurrection, but a kind of resurrection, personal conversion, being raised out of sin, death. They were saying that was already past. Well, then that would mean that they were saying that people had been converted in the past. And that would have Paul refuting that doctrine. Don't think you want to go down that road. Now, when I told you about these books last week, several of you purchased the books and paid double shipping. I'll be refunding shipping on one of those, all right? No sense paying double shipping. So if you order both books, go to my website, order both books, it will charge you double shipping, but if you order both of them at the same time, I will refund your full shipping on one of them. We'll combine the shipping. Okay, got to move on here. Now then, in the bulk of his video, let me set the stage here because it's very, very important. As a partial preterist, Dr. Ortland says we must honor the time statements of Scripture. He appeals to Matthew chapter 10, verse 22 and 23, where Jesus sent his apostles out and said they were going to be persecuted and chased from city to city. And he said they would flee from city to city. And he said, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man be come. Dr. Ortland says we've got to honor that. That was an event that happened in the lifetime of the first century generation. He goes to Matthew 16, 27, 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, shall reward him a man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Dr. Ortland rightly says we must honor that time statement. Matthew chapter 24. after talking about his coming on the clouds with power and great glory in verses 30 to 31, he cites Matthew 24, verse 34. Verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass until all of these things are fulfilled. Once again, Dr. Ortland says we must honor those time statements. And then he comes to the crux of his video. And he says, so here's the weakness of full preterism. They insist that we take all of these time statements. The coming of the Lord is at hand. Behold, I come quickly. And we must take them in a common sense, that's his term, in a common sense interpretation. Well, I agree 100% with that. But then Dr. Ortland says, we come to Revelation chapter 20, and we see this reference to the 1,000-year reign. Now, what's more than fascinating is that Dr. Ortland says, and I agree with this 100%, the term 1,000 years can be used either literally or symbolically. But he insists that it must be taken quasi-literally, because he doesn't believe that it's a literal 1,000 years. He believes the millennium has extended now for 2,000 years. Thus, he believes it's quasi-literal, quasi-metaphoric, which is a little bit of a strange, non-sensical view. Is it literal or is it metaphoric? Oh, it's both? That's an interesting hermeneutic, isn't it? So, this entire issue of the millennium is extremely, extremely important. I have people all of the time. You know, when I debated Chris Date in 2024, he argued that the idea of a 40-year millennium, which, by the way, Dr. Ortland acknowledges is one of the views in the full preterist paradigm, to describe the millennium as the period of time from AD 30 to AD 70, 40-year period of time. That's my view. But Chris Date, when I was debating him, said that's absolutely ridiculous. Well, here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Remember now, Dr. Ortland says we must take the time statements of Scripture at face value in their common sense definition. Thus, when we read about the coming of the Lord has drawn near, that was first century. When we read, behold, I come quickly, that was first century. When we read, the Son of Man will come on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and this generation will not pass until all of these things are fulfilled, that was first century. That was AD 70. This is Dr. Ortland's position. Let's transpose that and run over here to Revelation chapter 20. And let's just sum it up for brevity here with the following examination. The coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection for the rewarding of every man occurs at the end of the millennium. Now remember, folks, you've got to catch the power of this. Dr. Ortland goes to Matthew 16, 27, 28, and he's got a couple of choices here. Because Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. Is that not the judgment of Revelation chapter 20? The resurrection? You know, the just and the unjust, the living and the dead? Well, if it is the same, how then would Dr. Ortland explain that away? Because in verse 28, verily I say unto you, there's some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in the kingdom. Dr. Ortland is forced into one of two positions. Number one, since the time context controls verse 27 as well as verse 28, he has to admit that Christ did come in the judgment of all men in AD 70. Well, that's AD 70 for sure, right? To reiterate. But if the judgment of all men was in AD 70 at the coming of the Lord and the coming of the kingdom, which are all constituent elements of the post-millennial situation, then how do you have two judgments of every man? One at hand, one supposedly not at hand. I mean, if Matthew 16, 27, 28 has every constituent element of Revelation chapter 20, 10 and following, then just because Dr. Ortland has a view of the millennium which demands a long period of time, he creates two comings of the Lord for the judgment of all men in the kingdom. All based upon a view that says, oh, the millennium must be a long period of time. Now listen, I could quote to you scholarship after scholarship after scholarship. Men such as Gregory Beale. Now mind you, Gregory Beale believes the millennium is stretching out until the end of time, but he acknowledges that among ancient rabbis there was the view, guess what? That the millennium was a 40-year period of time. Now remember, Chris Date ridiculed me for taking that position, but here is one of the most renowned scholars in all the world acknowledging that ancient rabbis, some of them, not all of them, not suggesting that, but some of them acknowledge that the millennium was a 40-year period of time. In my upcoming book, I document that over and over. Colin Brown, one of the most noted scholars of the day, says that a millennium, or that the term 1,000 years, could be used to speak not quantitatively, in other words, not how long, but qualitatively, to speak of a divinely appointed, perfect period of time for the accomplishment of God's word, not even conveying the idea of a long period of time. Now, folks, neither Brown or Beale are full preterists, not by any stretch of the imagination. And yet, guess what? They acknowledge that the 1,000 years does not have to refer to a long period of time, but rather a complete period of time designated and appointed by God. So back to the idea of the coming of the Lord and the millennium. Remember, the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection are at the end of the millennium. In Revelation chapter 20, all of those things are lined out, right? Well, in chapter 22, John summarizes the entire vision that he had just given. And he says, the God of the prophets has sent and signified these things. There is no delineation. There is no divorcing. There is no statement, well, some of these things must shortly come to pass, but not all of them. No. These things must shortly come to pass. And he uses a Greek term, entokai. Entokai is only used 7, maybe 8 times in the New Testament, and never, and you know, I've had people that ought to know better, and they do know better. They're just not handling the Greek properly or accurately or honestly, I would say. They've actually told me, well, entokai doesn't convey when, it conveys how. And I want to say this with all due respect, with as much respect as I can muster for that. That is an utterly ridiculous and facile argument. There is no substance to it whatsoever. So, Revelation chapter 22, verse 6, the God of the prophets has signified these things. that must shortly come to pass. Now watch this. Then in Revelation chapter 22, John is told, John, do not seal the vision of this book because the time is at hand. The time, and it's the divinely appointed time, had arrived. Now notice what he does, verse 12. Behold, Jesus said, I come quickly. Is the coming of the Lord at the end of the millennium? Yes. When did Jesus say he was coming quickly? From tacos. Not tacos, tacos. Sorry, couldn't help. What does tacos mean? Well, those who try to negate and mitigate the temporal statement of the Greek language say, well, all in the world it means is that, when Christ finally gets around to coming, it may be 1,000, 2,000, it may be 5 million years. But, when he finally gets around to coming, he's going to come on the fastest cloud of heaven. I've given this illustration in the past. Let me give it again. Let's imagine, and this brings back really, really bad memories. Let's imagine that your house catches on fire. Some years ago, almost 18 years ago now, I was at my office, phone rings. And this lady goes, is this the preacher that lives on Magnolia Road? And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, your house is on fire. Ah! I slammed the phone down, ran out, jumped in my pickup, and I literally did 100 miles an hour on the way home, hoping I could find a cop. Never saw a single one. Pulled up into my driveway, and smoke was just billowing out of everywhere. Well, I had a car, a 69 Mach 1 428 Cobra Jet car, sitting in the garage with original paint, original interior, etc., etc. I was beside myself. The the fire department from a volunteer fire department in Dixon, Oklahoma, was already there. They put that fire out in approximately 15 minutes. They didn't save my car. I've still got it. It's finally running again. But let's imagine this. You get that phone call, and you call the fire department and say, my house is on fire, my house is on fire. And the dispatcher says, look, we'll be there shortly. We promise you, we'll be there shortly. They don't come. They don't come. They don't come. Finally, the house just burns down. Mine didn't, thankfully. You rebuild. And one day you're sitting on the porch several years later, and you hear sirens. And here comes a couple of fire trucks just blasting down the street. They pull into your driveway, tires screeching, and the firemen jump out and say, where's the fire? Where's the fire? And you're going, what in the world are you talking about? My fire was several years ago and my house burnt down in spite of the fact that the dispatcher said, you're going to come shortly. You're going to come quickly. And the fire chief says, oh, dude, you just don't understand. She didn't mean we're coming soon. She just meant that when we finally get around to coming, like right now, we're going to drive as fast as we could. This utterly ridiculous concept that Jesus was not saying, I'm coming shortly, quickly, temporally speaking, but rather to take the fastest cloud out of heaven, Kenneth Gentry says, rightly so, is exegetical fraud. It is a perversion of the Greek text. And it's not enough to run over to other passages in which taku might mean swiftly in regard to the nature of the action, and to say, well, see, it means quickly there, it's got to mean quickly here. No. And there's a whole lot more I could say on that. But I think you get the point. John describes the millennium says the prophets foretold those things, and it was things when John wrote were things that must shortly come to pass. And Jesus said, John was told, don't seal the book because the time has come, and that's the divinely appointed time has come, and behold, I come quickly. Here is Jesus predicting his coming, which is a post-millennial event, was coming shortly, soon, and quickly. Now, needless to say, there's a ton. I could produce videos for a year on the millennium. Now, a couple of things here. Joseph Vinces have written this book, The Millennium, Past, Present, or Future, a biblical defense for the 40-year transitional period. I agree with Joseph Vinces. I was privileged to write a chapter in this book. And remember, I'm currently writing and hoping to finish very shortly. Shortly. Wonder what I meant by that. Oh, anyway, this book has a ton of really, really excellent material in it. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, Bible Prophecy. Now, if you want to combine all three of these books, all right, we'll only charge you one shipping charge, and it will be the actual shipping. I will not pad the numbers. So go to my website, and if you want to order all three books, you'll probably be charged 3 shipping, but I will refund everything except one shipping charge. So I hope you see there's a basic fallacy in Dr. Ortland's approach to the millennium. I'll have more to say about this next Friday, but in the meantime, let me ask that you do this for some reading, for a reading assignment. Go to my website, donkpreston.com. In the search bar, type in end of the millennium. And you're going to have a ton of articles brought up that will help you so that you can begin to see there is extremely strong, genuinely probative evidence to prove that the millennium was 40 years and ended in the 1st century. Okay? Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I appreciate it so very, very, very much. Let me ask you to do this, okay? Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the share button. Get this word out. More and more people are coming. More and more people are understanding. More and more people are rejecting the inconsistent futurist views. Thanks again. I'll see you on Monday.